Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. Is cyan a basic colour term? That's the question we're going to explore in this session. But before I get started, I'd like very much to thank those of you who have been following these videos on different colours as basic colour terms, because they are important for the way in which we perceive personalities. And there will be a video on the cyan personality coming up fairly shortly. As well, if you're new here, you might find that the videos I've done previously on various different colour personalities will help to explain where this one is going. And of course, there's always that thumbs up button if you're enjoying what you hear. And if you really want to, there's also a subscribe button. All new subscriptions are free, and of course, they're always very welcome. So let's get started, shall we? Now, as I've said in the past, basic colour terms in the English language consist of 11 different colours. And we've looked at these in terms of the various different histories, the art usages of those colours, and also the way in which those colours come through as different types of personalities. But does cyan actually belong amongst that group? That's what we're going to explore today. Firstly, I want to explore the various features of this colour, because it's quite an interesting one. It appears in nature, and we'll be looking at some of the ways in which it occurs, as well as how it comes to be classified as a basic colour term, not in English, but actually in Russian. There is a history of the colour cyan that is important to look at, as well as the way in which we have used it as a cultural phenomenon. And of course, we'll be looking at the various effects of cyan as positive and negative effects, as well as what sort of idiomatic information we can glean from it. To begin with, cyan does not appear in the basic primary and secondary colour wheel, the one that we are all familiar with and were trained on as children. It is, however, seen as an option amongst the tertiary colours, if we look at it in terms of those colours that are squashed in between the primary and the secondary colours. And here we can see that it actually sits opposite an orange-red, which is called more commonly a scarlet colour. Cyan, however, is rather prominent in computer printing, and as part of the computer printing colour wheel, it is extremely important. It combines the elements of blue and green, and it is by far the brightest of the blues that can be imagined. It also, in this particular methodology, opposes red. One of the more interesting features of cyan, of course, is that it is equidistant between black and white. And like red, it also has the ability to be vibrantly visible against either a black or a white background. Its intensity ranges from subtle skies to stormy seas, and it is considered to be one of the Goldilocks colours. That is, it's not too warm and it's not too cold. Now, when we look at cyan in nature, we link it to specifically sunny skies and very warm and calm waters. This image shows the shoreline of the Whitsundays, a tourist resort here in northern Queensland. It has those beautiful blue skies and the beautifully serene, calm waters in the coral sea that wash up against some white coral sands. As a natural mineral, cyan consists of a whole range of pale blue colours. The most common, of course, are turquoise and aquamarine, but we also have blue quartz, and we have another mineral called larimar, which is also quite beautiful, although not as abundant as either turquoise or the aquamarine. All of the cyan minerals are prized for their luminescence. They're commonly used in jewellery for that purpose. When we look at flowers, we find that cyan is fairly rare. We do have some flowers like flax and forget-me-nots and milkweed, but more often than not, when we see cyan flowers, it's because they have been artificially coloured. There are YouTubes available that'll teach you how to do that, to make white flowers into something that looks spectacular but is never seen that way in nature. As far as fungi are concerned, cyan is also fairly rare. Here we have the blue meanies on the left, which are a psychedelic mushroom, which actually has some fairly amazing properties. And the other one is called chlorociboria. This is a common fungus that inhabits decaying wood. Amongst the corals, cyan is a little more prolific. Here we have staghorns and also the teal-tipped golden torch, two of the more spectacular types of coral. The staghorns, of course, being a hard coral, and the teal-tipped golden torch corals being soft, that is, they move around. Another interesting feature of cyan is that it appears when we light natural gas. So unlike many other gases, when they are flamed, natural gas will always burn teal-coloured. Moving into the animal kingdom, we find a lot more variety. Birds, for example, such as the Pacific parrotette or peacocks, will have a luminous teal colour that is associated with reflection of light from their feathers. We also have the teal-coloured snake that is a native of Indonesia. It's called the Indonesian pit viper. Aquatically, we have jellyfish and also the demoiselle, a fish that is commonly seen in home aquariums. Additionally, in aquatic circles, we have the aquarium crayfish, a cyan-coloured crayfish that is specifically bred for the purpose. As well as this, there is the blue swimmer crab. This is found in nature and is quite a tasty morsel if you happen to like eating crab meat. Here in Australia, we also have the blue-ringed octopus. Now, this is a rather beautiful specimen and it lurks around shallow waters along the Australian coastline, but it is also extremely venomous. And so if you come across one, please avoid it. In the arachnid world, we have the tarantula and we also have the blue jumping spider. These are just two examples of many arachnids that take cyan as part of their coloration. Here is an example of the Flinders Range scorpion. Now, this animal is actually brown in the daylight, but if you shine a black light on it, it fluoresces into this beautiful cyan coloration. Among the insect world, we also have a number of different insects that fluoresce in cyan. Here we have the striped weevil, the jeweled beetle, and on the right-hand side, there is one that I found in my own garden, the harlequin beetle. Other insects, such as butterflies, the Zalmoxis and the emperor butterfly, are both renowned for the cyan coloration of their wings. And then, not to be outdone, we also have the long-tailed skipper moth and the tiger moth, both examples of insects that carry cyan as part of their coloration. Moving on now to cyan as a basic colour term. Now, before I began my research into colour, I was under the impression that I had a fairly unique perspective on cyan as a potential basic colour term, because most languages don't have a basic colour term for the cyan blue colour space. We all divide colour spaces into pretty much the same sorts of categories across the world, but there are some minor differences. So this particular area, this blue-green space, has had different names over the millennia. In the Old Norse, Blair or blue also described the colour black, although it doesn't appear in this colour space at all. In Arabic languages, the word azul meant a bright blue-green, which is more like the cyan that we consider to be a colour today. And the Mayan Yucatec people had a word yaks, which is both green and blue, so there was no differentiation between the two. The word cyan itself was derived from the ancient Greek word cyanus, and it was first recorded as a color term called cyan in English during the 1870s. Recently, that blue-green color space has been co-lexified in English by researchers as the color grue, although that word hasn't really taken up very well. The Russian language, on the other hand, has two color words for this color space. There is no single term for blue as such, so that the Russian language actually divides this whole color space into two entirely different colors. This affects their perceptual distinctions as well, because they are classified as primary colors, and Russian speakers can differentiate between them, just as we differentiate between red and orange, for example. So here we have Sini, and you'll have to excuse my pronunciation here, which represents the dark blues, and Galuboy, which is representative of the lighter or cyan blues. These are distinctly separate colors, and as such are separate color terms. So in total, Russians have 12 basic color terms, whereas English to date only have 11, which of course is why I decided that cyan is probably the next up-and-coming color term. Moving on now to the history of cyan in art. Turquoise and lapis lazuli are two minerals that are carved or ground for pigment to decorate various different items within various cultures over the years. They're highly prized for their art and jewelry uses, and they symbolize life and rebirth regardless of the society from which they have been used. So here in Sumeria, we had their use as jewelry, as mosaics, and as various different carvings, all depicting some sort of religious significance. For Mesopotamia, it was fairly similar. Again, jewelry and little figurines that represented gods and goddesses. In Egypt, it was also highly prized for various decorations of pharaonic and also religious deities. So we have paintings and inscriptions and various carved artifacts. The Persians used these minerals prolifically for jewelry and for various different practical artifacts, such as shields and platters and sword handles. In ancient Greece, cyan was prized for various implements and also artistic objects, again associated with gods and goddesses. And the Romans also used them for similar purposes, but they were somewhat more practical in the items that they created from these specific cyan-colored minerals. Asian cultures also tended to prize these minerals as something very important, and again used them for their religious practices. So in China, we have some very fine carvings, all created from turquoise and lapis lazuli. Japan used it as, again, for carvings, but also for painting and decorating the various other objects. In India, too, we have various artifacts that embody the religious aspect of this color. And in Afghanistan, there was a prolific trade in turquoise beads, some of which are very highly prized for their beauty and also for the size of the items. In Tibet, cyan objects were revered specifically for religious purposes. Over in the Americas, we also have signs of cyan being highly prized. And here, the Aztecs used them for masks and also for crowns. The Mayans used them for decoration and symbolizing various deities and images of other creatures within their environments. And the American native Indian also used cyan, particularly in their decorative pottery and beadwork. In all of these cases, cyan symbolized heaven, infinity, and also sacredness. Cyan came fairly late into European art, and this is because a pure, stable cyan pigment was very difficult to obtain. It generally was a color that resulted in faded blue or green, but the modern electric cyan that we see now came from the advent of color photography, where the printing process known as cyanotype of the 19th century created this color. There is also the vision of a famous statue created by Bartholdi, which was originally created in copper, but over the centuries has faded and obtained a patina of cyan. Cyan was also used to depict scenes or concepts such as serenity, vitality, and nature. And here we have Claude Monet's water lilies, one of many of his paintings of similar topics. I've actually seen this particular garden, and yes, the water lilies are indeed that color. Coming more into the 20th century, we have Wassily Kandinsky's posters, which used a liberal amount of cyan in them. And then we have a Jean Miraut's Blue 2, an abstract painting, which it was one of a series that he made. Mark Rothko's Untitled 1978 was a lithograph that he created using the darker cyan, but perhaps the sweetest use was Eric Carle's children's illustrations from the book The Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar, where the cyan was used to depict the freedom of the butterfly that emerged from the caterpillar's cocoon. In Western culture, cyan has become a color synonymous with vibrancy, clarity, and considered fairly high-tech in its appeal. Its marketing uses generally depict something that is friendly and inviting, and so high-end jewelry companies tend to use it as something that looks bold and avant-garde. But baby products, which tend to embody the idea of trust and stability, are also commonly produced in this color. In the health field, we have a use of cyan as something to do with efficiency and cleanliness. So here we have a dentist chair that is colored cyan, but also uniforms for nurses, and some medications also are using this particular color to embody some sort of trust that can be created as a result of their use. In general branding, cyan tends to imply modernity and innovation. So here we have a research company which uses the color to invoke ideas of trustworthiness. And then there is a safety poster that is a call to action. Sterility invokes the idea of a technology that can also be trusted, and sustainability or limitless potentials is also one that uses cyan as a symbolic color. Currently, Eastern culture also has a long tradition of the use of cyan. In Chinese, cyan represents the infinite and the unending. There's delicate cyan glazes that have been used since ancient times in Chinese porcelain, and that has always been associated with luck and prosperity. But it also delves into the spheres of spirituality and various beliefs. In Japan, cyan is a symbol of wisdom and intelligence, and the lacquerware that uses cyan has various different delicate blues, cyan being the most prominent usually. But they also use cyan in textiles, particularly in the dyeing of silks. And there are also woodblock printings that use the color. Here, the woodblock print of the Great Wave of Kanagawa is associated with the depth of thought and clarity of mind. It rises to a respected and admired status. In India, cyan is symbolic of divine power and transcendence, and it's used to dye textiles and ceramics. So here we have examples of textiles being dyed in cyan with the Mughal art, and Hindu temple architecture also has liberal use of this color. The deity is Krishna, and Kashmanda in particular are associated with the color cyan. And there is also a type of embroidery, and again, my pronunciation is terrible, but it's Shambarumbal, and it also uses cyan, particularly the darker shades of it. Here, cyan is associated with communication, with creativity, and with self-expression. There are also links to higher states of consciousness, meditation, and spiritual awakening. There are similarities to the cultures of Thailand and Cambodia, where cyan is associated with the heavens and the divine. So here we have an example of the Buddhist temple interior that has a cyan roof to symbolize heavens. Traditional clothing also uses cyan, as well as performance art costumes, jewelry, and ceramics. All of these are linked to wisdom, intellect, and self-cultivation. In Indonesia, cyan enables the ideas of purity and new beginnings and change. It promotes physical and emotional healing and truthful communication, as well as self-expression. It is used quite liberally in batik printing. Cyan also plays a central role in Islamic architecture. Here we have an intricate fusion of geometric patterns, calligraphy, and floral motifs, and they are used quite liberally. They symbolize the heavens, the infinite, and the divine. Beauty, grandeur, and spiritual transcendence can be seen in Ottoman tile work, and glory and eternity of a ruler's domain is seen in the use of this color for religious as well as royalty purposes. Here is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem and the Isfahan Mosque, which appears in Iran. Both of these use cyan liberally in their tile work. There are also Arabic manuscripts which have a sense of divine wisdom associated with this color. The Safavid period of 1500s to 1730s has quite a number of cyan-coloured embellishments in the manuscript itself. But we also have the Shahnameh Book of Kings, which shows cyan associated with the glory of kingship. Used somewhat more judiciously are carpets and textiles that have this colour, because cyan is also associated with fertility, renewal, and protection of the home. The Kashan carpets, which are prized for their intricate work, have a small amount of cyan in them. Christianity, too, links cyan to a number of religious themes. In Catholicism, it links specifically to the Virgin Mary and symbolizes purity, humility, and devotion to God. Among the Orthodox Christians, it also is linked to Mary, but here it represents the heavens and the divine light of God and the divine powers and virtues that are associated with this. And here we see an Orthodox Christian church interior where cyan is used for those very purposes of denoting heavens and the divine light of God. From a secular perspective, cyan tends to represent the limitless possibilities of the future. It's a favorite for creating a peaceful and serene atmosphere, and it's linked to technology and digital interfaces. A light source that is unnatural, fantastical, and science fiction-esque is one that is used quite liberally in various different art forms, particularly film and theatre. But in the food industry, cyan is also used quite liberally to convey a sense of health and naturalness, regardless of the fact that very few foods are actually cyan-coloured in nature. There seems to be a subliminal link to the potential to enhance well-being, and that occurs even when the items of food that are presented in cyan blue are sickly sweet. And that now brings us to some of the positive effects of cyan on humans. In terms of physical abilities, cyan has been shown to reduce stress, and it also tends to lower the heart rate. It's refreshing and rejuvenating, and it encourages clear communication. On a mental level, it promotes mental clarity. It's linked to creativity and innovation, and it supports focus and concentration. Psychologically, it gives a sense of purity and cleanliness to whatever has used this color, as well as spaciousness, serenity, and it allows for reflection. It promotes balance and peace. And symbolically, it's all about growth and harmony, modernity, speed, high performance, and it gives an aura of innovation and vibrancy whenever it is used. Now, considering how much is associated with the color cyan, spirituality, and heavens and deities, one would wonder that it has any negative effects at all, but there are some. And again, from a physical perspective, it can actually reduce the readability of certain items, and when used for too long, it tends to tire the eyes. So if you're feeling tired while watching this video, that's probably why. It promotes laziness, boredom, and procrastination. It also allows an unemotional and selfish responses to others during any sort of issue that might arise. On a mental level, it promotes mental distancing and also boredom. It facilitates professional coldness and indifference, and it produces isolation and deception. Psychologically, it triggers a torrent of emotion-based thoughts, and it reduces sociability and increases dissatisfaction. It can also create people who are too relaxed and unfocused in the way in which they approach life. And symbolically, cyan permits avoidance of reality. It gives the appearance of immaturity and overstimulation, and it can produce the effect of conceitedness, narcissism, and impracticality. So to summarize these particular attributes, we have positively, a person who is relaxed, alert, creative, blissful, focused, healthy, reflective, and serene. On the negative side, they are sullen, uninspired, aloof, over-emotional, bored, indolent, isolated, and quite deceptive. Despite this, however, we do not have any idioms that are associated specifically with the color cyan in English. Idiomatic language tends to use the color blue to describe the issues associated with negative cyan issues, and also those associated with extremely positive cyan issues. Cyan, therefore, remains a literal color name rather than part of an established expression as per idiomatic usage. So what then have we learnt about the color cyan? It exists as a printer basic color. It is a BCT, a basic color term in the Russian language, but not yet in English as such, although it has a potential to become an English basic color term, mainly because of its use in computer and technology. Cyan's art history is associated with royalty and with spirituality, and its cultural uses tend to favour positive associations rather than negative ones. Nevertheless, cyan's negative effects link it to overuse of the colour and also the intensity with which it appears. Cyan has yet to be established as something idiomatic. And that brings us to the end of this video. It's certainly a different colour when one considers that it hasn't actually permeated our language in English quite as far as any of the other basic colour terms that we've met up until now. Certainly, it makes for a very interesting personality type, and I hope you'll be with me when I examine the cyan personality and how it's constructed. I'll catch you for that one next time. Bye.